Thanks very much to NALED, to British Embassy, and also to Deputy Prime Minister for coming to support us with this event, and thanks to you, Nika. So I had the great pleasure of working together with you as the IFC rep for South Caucasus, and I witnessed firsthand a lot of the really wonderful things that were happening with the revolution within the Georgian business environment. And what I remember vividly is that there was no limit to the vision or the imagination about what the country was capable of achieving. You set out and said, okay, we want to make the best possible environment. We're going to take on Singapore. We're going to take on the United States. And this year, you actually surpassed the United States in the Doing Business rankings. So, Nika, with that, of course not. It just happened. Yes. It just happened. So, with that sort of backdrop, I mean, look, you've implemented, or the country has implemented, 47 different reforms in 14 years. What's the secret sauce to success?
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank government of Serbia for this opportunity. I would like to thank NALED for this opportunity, for me being, it's my first time in this country, and I'm really happy to be here and to have this opportunity. I would like to thank you, Tom, personally for standing by Georgian government back then when you were representative in South Caucasus, and when we did all these reforms together, thanks to IFC as well. Yes, you are right. We did an amazing number of reforms in Georgia. I think back then what we had to do is we had to come up with a vision for the country to go forward. We analyzed the region and realized that Azerbaijan next to us has oil, Kazakhstan has oil, Russia is also very rich with resources. We have Armenia, which is like very rich with expatriates who bring lots of money to country. Turkey, our also neighboring country, is very, very vibrant new economy. So we had to find our niche. And when we are looking for our niche, we realized that Georgia's niche can be regional investment and trade hub. And for that, we realized that we analyzed what can possibly attract international best investors to come to Georgia first, and from Georgia to go to the rest of the region. This was our vision. Our vision was that if investor thinks of our region, let him think of Georgia first, analyze Georgia first, and then go to the rest of the region. And for that, we realized that the biggest problems were actually government and bureaucratic problems, red tape, corruption. These were the biggest problems. And we decided to start pursuing the reforms and looked at every single rule and regulation from private sector's point of view. We decided, I mean, there are different ways how you look at rules and regulations. One way, if government looks at rules and regulations saying that, okay, we need this information for the private sector to give us. We need to regulate this. We need to create new permits, new licenses. But government needs to realize that every time new permit, new license, new regulation comes in force, you are actually pushing back private sector, you are pushing back into entrepreneurship, you are pushing back in investments. So we decided to give it as much freedom as possible. Getting rid of most of the rules and regulations. I can tell you in figures, we got rid of 85% of licenses and permits. We had 1,000 licenses and permits. After reforms, within 18 months' time, we had only 60 or 70. We got rid of 85% of license permits. And this is not because we want to go ahead in doing business report. We just wanted, we had our vision, we wanted to create better environment for private sector. By the way, first time when Simeon Jankov, where is he? He was somewhere here. When Simeon Jankov came to Georgia saying that, congratulations guys, you jumped from 112th place to 37th place, we didn't even know that doing business report existed. We were just doing it.
You're doing it for yourself.
We were doing it for our vision to create better business environment. And then we realized that this is actually an amazing blueprint, an amazing methodology to create better business environment. And after that, we already started to continue reforms, having that in mind that actually this is a good blueprint. Why don't we go with that, and why don't we see how much freedom that will it give to the private sector? And I want to give couple of examples why I think these doing business reforms are important, not only for ranking and not only for figures, but also for the economy itself. During the same period when Georgia went from behind hundreds to top 10, it was like a period of 6-7 years time. 8 years' time. During the same period, Georgia's GDP per capita in nominal terms quadrupled. Georgia's GDP per capita in PPP terms doubled. Our average growth rate was somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5%, and that's without oil, without gas, without any natural resources. Only due to taking corruption and taking bureaucracy out of the private sector, I call it debottlenecking private sector, giving more freedom to private sector. Our FDI to GDP on average was 10 to 12%. Number of companies registered per year quadrupled. Number of square meters constructed per year quadrupled. And tax revenues have increased significantly despite the fact that we decreased number of taxes and despite the fact that we decreased tax rates. So on average, I wouldn't say that this is exactly because we progress in doing business, but if you look in parallel, you will see that more we were progressing in doing business ranking, the better there was a situation for private sector, especially for SMEs. Doing business report, I believe, is an amazing tool for giving more freedom to SMEs, for small and medium-sized enterprises to create more wealth, more growth, more jobs, and this gives any government more credibility. By the way, I would like to congratulate Serbia because being in top 50 is an amazing result. It's not easy, and I would like to tell to everyone that the higher you go, the more difficult it gets. And it takes time. Georgia didn't go it directly from below 100 to top 10. It took us time. It took us a huge effort. It took us 8 years to get there. But with the consistency of these reforms, and we are all seeing how much effort the government of Serbia is doing for that, I'm sure that you'll get there as well. And Serbia becoming top 20 or even top 10 is just behind the corner.
Okay, I think that's very welcome commentary given the earlier comments today on the small setback in the ratings. We'll come back to that in a sec. But look, Nika, at the starting point when the reform effort began, again, you said very clearly it's not because you were trying to improve in doing business rankings, but you believed that the country could have prosperity through having a better business environment. But just to remind you, the starting point was actually 112th place.
Yep.
So, and it was a multiple year sort of effort. So can you please tell our audience, your perspective, first of all, what was the single most difficult and most complicated, hardest reform that you had to implement? And then looking from more positive side, okay, which reform was the most politically popular, the one that you were most appreciated for? And then also, which is the one that had the greatest impact on the country's prosperity?
Okay, it's a few questions in one. First of all, I believe that most difficult reform was a changing mindset of bureaucrats. The biggest problem that we came across was actually not opposition in parliament, was not private sector, was not population, was actually our own civil servants. Bureaucrats don't like change. They are risk-averse people, let's face it. And they don't like anything new. They got used to it, and that's it. They don't want to anything new. And I remember first time I told to my heads of agencies that let's get back on red line. Let's get rid of some of the paper, some of the signed signatures, some of the stamps that private sector has to bring us. They told us, no, it's impossible. Why? There's always two reasons. One is security. Second, this is how our fathers used to do that.
And grandfathers and great-grandfathers.
So you cannot argue against that. It's either security or this is how our fathers used to do that. So how do you change the mindset of these people? That was our biggest question. So we realized that we had to come up with something innovative. And I think we came up with the two overarching reforms which made all the change. And this is silence is consent, one, and one government principle. But they need to be done, implemented simultaneously. Silence is consent is very simple. If you ask for a permit, for example, if you want to construct a house and you ask for a permit, if you don't get an answer within 20 days time, it's yes, automatically. For license, it's a 30 days time. If you ask for a license, if you don't get an answer, it's a yes, automatically.
That sounds good.
That sounds good, yeah. But, so that already puts some pressure on bureaucrats because bureaucrats, by their nature, they are not service-oriented people. they're decision makers. They decide if you get your house permit or not. So they don't care about it. They don't look at people as they have to service them. They are decision makers. So this thing already put them kind of time measurement. The second one was one government principle, which means that government agency cannot request anybody, citizen or the private sector, to bring to them any paper from different government agencies. So just to give you an example, before the reform, if you wanted to open a business in Georgia, first you had to go to Ministry of Interior, get a stamped paper that you are not under criminal investigation. You had to go to Revenue Service, get a stamped paper that you don't owe any taxes. You had to go to court, you have to get a paper that you don't have any court problems. 9 agencies you had to go to and bring all this to registrar. Now, after 2 of these reforms, we told to the registrar, first of all, you have to give him answer in 20 days' time, in some limited period of time. And second, if you need all these papers, go get them yourself. So the bureaucrats from decision makers became service-oriented people where they had to run around and get all these papers themselves. So we put them in a position how they were putting the citizens and the private sector.
Doesn't feel good.
Doesn't feel good. The first thing that came up, they said, Nika, we don't need so many papers. We don't need so many signatures. We don't need so many steps. I said, what about security? What about how our fathers used to do that? Come on, our fathers, we can do somewhere innovatively. So I think this was a breaking moment. This was a breaking moment, I'll tell you why. They couldn't tell us, by the way, they know the best how to simplify everything. But they couldn't tell us because it would be, in that case, they would be fighting against somebody their own, their peer,
interests,
their colleague. Yeah, because I mean, this would be actually telling off about their colleagues. In this case, they had a right to do that because they could get fired. So the moment you can get fired. Yeah, of course you could get fired. In that moment, they had to actually tell us how it is possible to simplify these rules and regulations. And what happened with this, we gave them bonuses. And this is one more reform which was very important. We gave the bonuses for innovations. We gave bonuses to people who came up with new ideas how to simplify the rules, how to serve better customers, how to serve better private sector. And at some moment we had dynamics in Georgia where ministries, heads of agencies were competing with each other, literally competing with each other, who would come up with more simplifying rules, with more innovative measures, how to please private sector, how to please citizens. And this competition brought all these changes. It was not government, or it was not one person or 10 people who sat down and came up with these new ideas, with so many innovations. It was actually few rules and regulations that created this innovative environment inside of the public services, and they came up with these new ideas and new ways of simplifying rules and regulations, and we actually gave them bonuses.
So on that point, Nika, I mean, how did you explain to the public that you actually need to give civil servants bonuses in order to incentivize them? And that one sounds politically tricky.
That is difficult. That's very difficult. At some moment, we saw best public servants leaving for the private sector. And we realized that if that would continue, we would actually lose our best people. Which is okay, which is understandable, but at the same time we could increase salaries for everyone because it would bring a huge pressure on budget.
Right.
So we had to come up with something. We had to come up how to keep your best 5 people in any ministry, because it's always 5 people who actually do the work in any ministry. How you keep your best 5, the rest actually work on these 5 people. Yeah. So the 5 people in any ministry, doesn't matter how big the ministry is, these are the 5 people who actually do the job. You need to keep them. And you need to keep them satisfied. You need to keep them happy. And the only way of doing that is to give them salaries which are resembling to their private sector vis-a-vis. Mm-hmm. And this could have been done only through bonuses in our case. And we said that, guys, if you come up with innovative measures, with better services, with better public services, you will get bonuses. And that actually worked. that works in private sector. Why don't you think it will work in public sector? It actually worked in public sector. So we actually came up with key performance indicators. And when I was actually Prime Minister, I was running it more of a like private sector company because every minister had key performance indicators. And based on key performance indicators, which were actually quantifiable, they would actually get bonuses. And they could get money to give bonuses to their best people. So little bit dynamics inside of the government which had to change it in order to achieve those results that we had in the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Let me transition for a moment to the time that you were the Minister of Finance, where I know that tax reform was a major point on the agenda, and I say maybe a small bit of help was given by IFC, not too much because you had your own ideas, but let me ask the following. So during the time that tax reform was going on, the number of taxes were slashed from 21 to 5, the rates were slashed, and yet at the same time, revenues went up. Can you explain to us whether there's existence of Georgian Laffer curve?
Yes.
How did you do this?
Laffer curve works, and Georgia is an amazing result for that. And I believe it can be done in many, many countries. I really don't know if it can be done in Serbia or not, but it can be done in many countries. It depends on how big your shadow economy is. Georgia's shadow economy was very big. We realized that with that type of a small economy, you couldn't have that high tax burden. It was impossible. So it was very clear that the private sector was actually ready to pay 100% taxes if this 100% was reasonable enough. Mm-hmm. So we slashed down number of taxes from 21 to 6 and then to 5, and we cut down on tax rates of every single tax.
Now what about the cost of compliance and the number of procedures needed to actually pay?
And we simplified everything. Mm-hmm. We simplified the rules, we simplified the regulations, we got rid of all double taxation, or double interpretations. It's very, very important how simple tax code is. It's very important how simply it is to calculate profit tax. This is the most important, because if you've ever worked in a tax system, you know that calculating profit tax is the most important way of fining the private sector, of penalizing private sector. So getting rid of all the difficult interpretations and simplifying the tax rules was very, very key of this reform. Mm-hmm. I'll give you one example, just to give you an example. For example, in customs, if you wanted to import sport shoes, the customs duty was 30%. If you wanted to import sneakers, it was 0. Now, what is $1,000 bribe to a customs officer?
Exactly.
And everybody imported sneakers, of course. There was 0 sport shoes. So, I mean, we found hundreds, if not thousands, examples like that in the tax code and the customs code, because these are laws that have been accumulating for years and years, and unless you clean them up once in a while, you will find some kind of ancient rules which sometimes still works. So definitely simplification, one of the key roles. Simplification was one of the key words which actually contributed to this reform. And we saw an amazing thing. Actually, private sector came out from shadow. Actually appeared that private sector wants to pay 100% taxes, and they don't want to pay any bribes. They don't want to keep in shadow, because this way they can access to bank loans much better. They can access to many different international deals much better. They can attract international investors much better and easier. They can have totally different interactions with international community much easier and much without any big problems. So they actually want to pay taxes 100%. They want to come out from shadow. It's just a matter of how we will be able to deliver these reforms to that. We actually told to the private sector that we'll close eyes on your past. We know, but we thought we will close the eyes. But from now on, you'll pay 100%. And from now on, there will be very much stricter rules. Lower taxes, but stricter rules.
And I'm sure people get used to that very, very quickly.
Oh yes, yeah. And even now we are seeing that actually this has been continuing in Georgia. I mean, our government has been changed since then. And the great thing is that these reforms prove to be sustainable. there is a new government since October 2012 in Georgia, and still we are not seeing any corruption creeping up, or we are not still Georgia is in top 10 in doing business reform. This year it's number 6, even better than Georgia was back in 2012, 2013. So sustainability of these reforms is actually very clear, because private sector and population gets used to better, efficient services, not paying bribes, being out of shadow economy, and they will not allow government to go back to those things. And about your question, which you think was most popular?
Politically, yes.
Politically, I believe that what gave us very big political boost and political credit, definitely one was tax code change, by the way, definitely. But second was so-called, I call it public service hall, when we put together all our public services in one place. So if you want to get private sector or citizens, if you want to get anything from government, from registering land, registering birth, death, wedding, company, contract, you name it, ID, passport, everything is done in one center. Everything, absolutely. Approximately 500 services. And it's done in such a way that any service is provided within 10 minutes. You go in, you come out, and then you receive an SMS, please come and take your passport, or you receive an SMS that please, by the way, we have a drive-through. When you get a passport, you can actually, like in McDonald's, you don't have to go inside of the public service. So you go a drive-through, you take a passport, and you go home. And we have a services where you can get passport in 1 hour or in 24 hours in different prices. But the best one is we have actually cafe where you can order 1 coffee, 1 cheesecake, and 1 passport. And pay for it. Thank you.
So, Milica, how much time do we have? Do we have time for another question? Okay, well, so then maybe I'll just try then to wrap up. I can see the look on your face is telling me that actually there's not too much time. So look, Nika, I mean, you know, some people in Serbia are feeling really unhappy with the results today of doing business report. So many people put their hearts really into trying to push things forward and to make things work. And as was noted, I mean, look, the country still has made reforms. It's still moving forward. It's still improving. But can you comment? I mean, Georgia also, you know, although there was the meteoric rise, there were also some times when there were setbacks. And I remember in particular, you were really unhappy when they introduced this getting electricity index. So, you know, what kind of, you know, words of inspiration can you give on how to deal with the setback, and what do you see looking forward for Serbia?
First of all, I definitely can see that there is a huge political will in this government to go ahead with these reforms, which is the most important. It's the most important part of it. And believe me, it wasn't easy for Georgia either, and we had our setbacks. Sometimes World Bank would change the methodology and would kick us out from top, whatever it was. And I remember I even wrote an op-ed in The Economist.
In The Economist,
saying that please don't keep changing methodology. These things don't come easy. It takes time. And I'm sure that this country has all the potential for that. And I'm sure we've seen today how determined this government is. And I'm sure that keep on doing what you are doing, and the results will definitely be there. And what is more important, population and private sector will really appreciate these reforms, because this is something that gives them more freedom, possibility to create more wealth, possibility to create more money for themselves and to create more jobs. So if Georgia could, Serbia can without any problems. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Well, I guess we're out of time. I'll leave last word with you if there's anything else you want to share in first impressions. Otherwise,
it's my first time here. I just arrived a few hours ago. I had very, very interesting meetings and very interesting people with very interesting ideas. I'm sure that this is minor setback, which I know that nobody really likes this kind of going back, but being in top 50, I believe is still a huge result and a great achievement. And I wish you guys all the best luck. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nika. Hope to have you back soon.